Eyewitness News presents NewsMakers, winner of the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Award for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming, with your hosts, Jayne and Bugda and Andy Mehalshick.
Hello and welcome to NewsMakers. I'm Jayne Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick. Today we're talking about something very precious to each and every one of us, our memory. According to the Alzheimer's Association, Americans are developing the disease fast and it's growing every day. Today we are talking about the support that is available locally and the continued hope to find a cure. When we come back, I'll introduce you to our guests, and our conversation will begin when this edition of NewsMakers begins right after this. Welcome back to NewsMakers. Jayne Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick, and our topic today is Alzheimer's disease. It is a disease that impacts many lives, and today we're talking about some of the support and programs that are in our area to help families that are living with the disease and caregivers who have the daunting task of taking care of a loved one with the disease. And we are with two gentlemen who are champions in the field who are working to help families in our area. Clay Jacobs, who's the Vice President of the Greater Pennsylvania Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and Ryan Schofield, who is the Events Manager for the Greater Pennsylvania Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
And a lot of people watching this show will be able to relate because I believe that the disease impacts many lives. Whether you're the caregiver, whether you're someone who's been recently diagnosed or someone who's living with the disease. And I think we'll begin by just talking a little bit to tell the difference between when we hear the term Alzheimer's and dementia. Give us a little bit of a definition.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and folks often struggle even when they're experiencing cognitive issues. Because when we think of dementia, we think of it and Alzheimer's disease as the same thing, but they're not. Really, dementia is when we see, it's a syndrome. We see certain things happening that are impacting daily life, and because of that, we know something's going on. Alzheimer's disease is just the most common type of dementia. So look, if you look at it as an umbrella, dementia is the big umbrella. Alzheimer's disease is just a type of dementia that falls under that umbrella.
And when someone is thinking that maybe they're having a problem or a concern, when should they start talking to a health official about this, a doctor?
It's a great question because so often we don't want to talk about it, right? We see the person we love, the person we care about changing, or for ourselves we see minor issues that we write off. And the important thing is when they start occurring more frequently, more severely, then it's a concern. When we start seeing problems with normal activities or judgment, personality changes, even when we think about the disease, it's more than just memory. It's a progressive neurodegenerative disease, so we see all sorts of symptoms. And so when you also see memory plus other things, it's another big warning sign that we should, at the very least, talk to our friends and family, if not immediately start talking to our physicians and others.
It's important to just be open and honest about it. If you see someone changing and you notice it, talk to them, talk to your family, or talk to a doctor. Don't keep it hidden, and because that's, I think, one of the bigger problems with this particular disease is it's still something that goes undiagnosed so often.
And how big of a factor is admitting there's a potential problem? Do some families or people ignore it, thinking they don't want to see the signs, or maybe push it away and say, it can't be happening to my loved one or me? I mean, how much of a role is admitting that there could be a problem is in moving forward? Absolutely.
That's for yourself. If you can imagine those changes starting, and we think it's just regular aging, which it isn't, but then also even when you know it isn't. It's a little bit more than that. There's potential to lose. We don't know what to expect, but we assume it means a loss of so much. It means a loss of people we know and care about. We think our friends or family or neighbors aren't going to engage with us the same way, and sometimes that does happen, but it's all of those things, or that maybe we won't be able to drive anymore. And a whole slew of things come along with it, and so we don't want to talk about it. And even on the medical side, it's a little bit tougher to diagnose, right? So when we are experiencing these symptoms, it's not something you can see in a biopsy. It's not something where you can really have a feel for it. Is you see a personality, you see memory, you see the essence of a person changing a little bit.
How aware is our medical community You know, many folks, and we do have an older demographic in northeastern Pennsylvania. How many doctors would know at the spot with the signs? In other words, would they realize it's Alzheimer's?
Yeah.
Is that an issue of diagnosing it?
So I think one of the things we see is that Medicare and Medicaid is surveyed, and less than 50% of people are told of their diagnosis. And so we talk about a gap there. Are we having that conversation? Locally, we have some great providers, some great health systems that are doing some really innovative work in approaching that, but in general, we don't. And yet, so part of that and the mission of the association is help move that forward. So we want to provide physicians and PAs and others with the resources they need. In fact, just this summer, the National Institute on Aging and the association released new guidelines on diagnosing Alzheimer's disease. So one of our roles is to help professionals know what to look for, to help them know about the resources, and then also, to the earlier question, to have families more willing to talk about it. We have to drive up a demand and the accountability for folks wanting to talk to their physicians, and then physicians feeling like they have all the tools they need. And as we hopefully get closer to a treatment or to something that modifies the disease, that early diagnosis is just that much more important.
We do have a number, a 1-800 number that we'll be showing throughout the show, and that is for a hotline that's open 24 hours a day for families that have questions. And on our website, pahomepage.com, I have your website linked up that has tons and tons of information for anyone who's looking, has questions. So when they call that hotline, who answers, and what can someone expect to, who's at the other end?
Yeah.
It's always a person. It's always going to be, you're always going to get a person there 24/7, somebody that's willing to help, somebody that's willing to answer your questions, provide support, and the website is the same. It's got a lot of information because that's the first place people will go anymore. You know, if you have an issue, you've had a diagnosis, you go right to, you Google it, and you go right there, and at alz.org, hopefully you get a lot of the answers and a lot of the support you're looking for.
It's an amazing website. There's a lot
It
there.
is. The website and the phone, the helpline always amazes me. 200 languages and dialects we can respond to, and it is 24/7. There have been times if I don't sleep well and I call just to see how it's going and say hello. You know, a couple rings, you have somebody on the other line, to Ryan's point, and that's something I know we're proud of, but it's also a need. You know, if you're up with a loved one and it's they're unable to sleep and you're having care issues, to know that you can reach somebody on the other line is vital, is a vital lifeline for so many.
And you mentioned that there were new guidelines that were introduced this year. What else was newsworthy this year? Anything else on the front that's a positive for the Alzheimer's?
I think so. I think there are a lot of things. We saw some things that are really important to our mission when we talk about brain health overall. So just this summer, we saw really two big research announcements. Is that we found that there was a research trial, the Sprint Mind trial, that actually showed lowering blood pressure, cleared some of the tangles that are the plaques that we associate with Alzheimer's disease, and showed a significant change. We also saw, for the second time ever, medication that actually impacted some of the hallmarks of the disease in the brain. Now it's moving to expanded trials, but to actually have hope for treatment on lifestyle changes and medical interventions or therapeutic interventions is something that would have been almost unheard of 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
And Clay, we were saying, talking before we went to air about it becoming more of a public health issue and getting lawmakers on board and maybe making folks more aware of it. Is it becoming more of a public health issue than ever before?
Advocacy is a big part of what we do, letting lawmakers know that it's an issue that we care about. It's a big public health issue. With what we said, for every person diagnosed, there's usually 1 or 2 unpaid caregivers, and it affects the entire family. So we think of it as, you know, a health epidemic, and we hope that the lawmakers continue to feel that way too.
Yeah, and it's expensive on a personal, emotional, and financial toll. It is the most expensive disease in America. And so when we talk about public health and elected officials, we not only have the personal side of the disease, but it is impacting our economy, healthcare, a whole slew of things that really impact us all. And so we want to rally people to have that conversation.
Here's your magic wand question. If you had to say anything to the powers that be, federal, state, or local government, what, from your vantage point and what you see and deal with every single day, what do you think, in a top 1 or 2 list, what you need most of? that you could a wish list to get out there from the powers that be?
That's
an open-ended question.
But it's a good thing.
But they're watching.
I think when we look at that, the disease is so varied. Somebody gets a diagnosis and they're essentially pushing a boulder up a hill. Lack of treatments, lack of awareness, having to navigate a care system that maybe they don't understand. And so there are things in each of those areas that state and federal officials can take action on. Maybe it's something like workforce training, to have dementia-specific training for care providers. Maybe it's things like we've seen tremendous increases in research funding to have a disease-modifying treatment. Or maybe it's even more along the lines of things like respite funding. So the good and the bad is that there are things we can do today at every stage of the disease that would make an impact for families. That gives us almost this buffet of things to do. And we're seeing state and federal governments start chipping away at that. What I would say is not what, it's the pace. That this is a disease, even in Pennsylvania, 400,000 people with a diagnosis today, almost 700,000 caregivers, and that number is expected to grow. So this is an issue for all of us today, not one we can put down the road 10 years, 20 years.
You mentioned 500,000. When you think about that, to put in perspective, in my mind, it's combining the populations of every man, woman, and child in Luzerne and Lackawanna counties. 600,000 people.
It's very close. And
that's scary.
Luzerne and Lackawanna County, in particular, because of our aging population, we estimate that there's almost 25,000, 26,000 people just with a diagnosis. So 1 in 3 families. If we are in our neighborhood, someone on our block either has the disease or has a family member with the disease, and that is an astounding thing to think of when we're driving or when we're even walking down our own street.
And then add to that the collateral effect of the families and caretakers. They're all impacted by it, and they're worried about it, and they want to know what they can do.
Yeah, and that's a great example. The work Ryan does in communities every day, and the impact he gets to hear from the families.
Yeah, for every person you meet living with dementia, you meet 1 or 2 caregivers every time, and they're unpaid caregivers. And that's not to say that our nurses and our home health people aren't wonderful people and caregivers too, but the unpaid caregivers and the toll that it takes on the family, not just financially, mentally, when it gets to a certain state where someone could be wandering or someone maybe does have to stop driving, there's so much collateral damage that goes along with the entire family, and we hear from them all the time as our population locally and nationally continues to age. Think about the baby boomers. There's a lot of them, and as they're moving into that age bracket where this becomes a bigger and bigger concern, the disease itself becomes a bigger and bigger concern.
Nobody can quite understand what it's like to maybe stay all day with someone a loved one who has Alzheimer's, and the toll it takes on that caregiver.
We even run into people who are running support groups or things like that, and they have hard times getting family members to come out to a support group meeting because they've got no one to sit with their loved one that has the disease. So it's hard to get even to some of the great programs and the services that are available. It's hard to get to them because you need someone, so much constant care.
And it's a progressive disease, so even if we have a certain issue handled, the disease continues, and it continues to destroy brain cells. And so the issues we're dealing with today will absolutely be different a year from now. And so that constant change and support and the differing needs is something that even after somebody receives a diagnosis, we may not think, what does this mean 2 years from now, 5 years from now, in some cases 20 years from now? And how do we handle that extended toll of a disease like this?
Tell us a little bit about what the Alzheimer's Association does locally. What do you all do down in your offices and how you help people locally?
Lots of education, excuse me, lots of programs and services. Our education person, Jeff Daubert, he's just a great guy. He's a wealth of information. He's in nursing homes. He's in different assisted living places. It was only a few weeks ago. You think about the fact that you just need to deal with someone with Alzheimer's a little bit different almost in every walk of life. He does trainings for first responders. If you encounter somebody with dementia, the signs and the different ways to deal with people with the disease. So a lot of education, a lot of programs, a lot of support.
And that support is so important for families. And if someone is looking for a support group or to learn more information, how can they find out?
ALZ.org. And if you're in the local area, you can stop by and see us right down the road on Franklin Avenue.
We were talking about what's available service-wise out there, and if somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's and progressive, I guess progresses at different paces for different people. What kind of, would they go to assisted living? Would they go into a nursing home? And how would they pay for that? In other words, that's the big question. They're saying, okay, you know about physical problems and that kind of thing, but mentally, what resources are out there? What options do families have, generally speaking?
Yeah, and that is a difficulty. What does that look like? And that's when we talk about early diagnosis. Part of the importance is so we can plan, so that the person living with the disease can be part of that planning as well. And so often, Ryan mentioned some of our education programs, things like care planning sessions, or being able to talk through some navigation, us being able to help folks. We have partnerships with group like Person-Centered Counseling, which is a program of the PA Link, where folks who are dealing with dementia, we can refer them, and then they'll get individual counseling on some of the options available to them. Because in some cases it may be long-term care insurance, private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, there's a whole slew depending on the level of care. What we try and make sure to do is that whatever level of care, we're helping providers meet certain standards, we're helping train and set those standards, we're helping families know what to look for, and ultimately too, when we talk to the families we work with, as we'd imagine, folks want to stay at home as long as possible and then be at the most appropriate level of care. And so that may mean a whole slew of things, and depending spouse and partners traveling with. So we really try and make sure individually we have a chance to have those conversations.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the fundraising efforts and talk about a new committee that Clay's part of. You're watching NewsMakers. We were on pahomepage.com. We are under the NewsMakers link, and we are a proud recipient of 3 Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Awards for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming. And we want to mention that one of those PAB awards just happened to be a show that we did on Alzheimer's with Clay. So we're very proud of that. NewsMakers will return right after this. Welcome back to NewsMakers. Jayne and Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick. And our topic today is Alzheimer's disease, and we're here with the Alzheimer's Association, Clay Jacobs, Ryan Schofield's with us. And we're talking about a wealth of information for people who are living with the disease, for their caregivers, and information, of course, today on pahomepage.com. And we're showing the 1-800 number that people who have information for, to get more information for caregivers and for those seeking information about getting involved with the Alzheimer's Association. But Clay, you were recently put on a task force in the state level, so tell us a little bit about that. We're very proud of you for that.
Thank you. Well, I had the privilege actually appointed by the Wolf administration to a 15-member task force on Alzheimer's disease, and specifically the state plan on Alzheimer's disease. The plan was developed in 2014 under the Corbett administration, and now the Governor Wolf administration and Secretary of Aging, a Northeast PA native, Secretary Teresa Osborne, pulled together this task force with representation from throughout the Commonwealth that will look at enacting aspects of the state plan on everything from public education to end-of-life care, and each year taking on a few priorities to make substantive changes for Pennsylvanians dealing with Alzheimer's disease or any related form of dementia. So meetings have started, and really we're looking at what can we do on the biggest impact, what can impact Pennsylvanians as a whole, you know, the over 1 million people impacted, and how do we do that quickly? How do we pick up the pace of that work? And so it's just it's a privilege, but it's also an exciting time to see the Commonwealth taking this on and with such dedication to making a difference.
And you'll come back and tell us more about it in the future.
That will be fantastic.
Great.
Thanks.
And of course, you know, we talk about at whatever level, state or local level, funding, money. I mean, nothing, you know, volunteers are needed. Ryan, and that's your specialty.
Sure.
Where do we stand locally or at statewide level raising money for these programs and education and where do the funds come from, and how do you help guide that along locally to raise money for Alzheimer's services?
So much comes right from our community. We have committees of dedicated volunteers. We're an organization that is volunteer driven and staff supported. So that's, you know, put simply, you know, our volunteers organize these events, the Walk to End Alzheimer's, Power and Purple, the Longest Day. Anything that's bringing in revenue is something that tends to be volunteer driven. So we're always looking for more people. You know, it tends to often be people who've been touched in some way by the disease, whether they've lost a loved one or they have someone currently I'm dealing with that, and we have just so many groups of really dedicated and tireless people that give their own time, and we raise a lot of money through the Walk to End Alzheimer's, that kind of money to fund research, to fund the programs and the education that we talked about earlier.
And now the walks for next year, people can start thinking about putting teams together.
Yep.
How do they start doing that?
alz.org/walk. When you go there, it'll prompt you to find the walk near you. So in our area, we have the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre Walk. We have one in Bloomsburg, Carbon County, Stroudsburg, Schuylkill Haven. So they go there, they can find their local walk, they can start a team with family, with friends, coworkers, businesses, and then do any type of fundraising that they want. And we have in the fall, September and October is when our walk season happens, and then they come out to the event, and we have a great day.
What other events do you have planned throughout the year?
Another exciting one is what's called the Power in Purple. We had our first one last May, and our next one will be coming in the spring. That's an event. It's a really nice dinner in Scranton where we honor women in the healthcare field that have done a lot for our organization, done a lot for the fight against Alzheimer's. So we honor them, and it gives them a chance to come out and celebrate all the work they've done.
And there's another event actually in November, and it'll be every November. For the first time, we're holding a caregiver respite conference as well to train, educate, support caregivers, give them a day away to be able to be with others. We'll normally do it in person, but we're also going to be able to broadcast it online because we know not all the time, or if it's a bad day, you might not be able to step away from home. But we want to, in addition to the core work we do day in, day out, provide some new opportunities to support caregivers. And it's only possible as a volunteer funded organization through the work Ryan and his volunteer partners make happen.
And Clay, how we were talking also about the impact of social media, and you were saying that sometimes folks cannot get to support group meetings. Just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, so everything we do in person, support groups, care consultation, care planning sessions, education is also duplicated online and via phone, because we know people interact and perceive things in different ways. So if somebody goes to alz.org, or if they go to communityresourcefinder.org, we have ways that they can interact that fits with them and where they're at the time. We have somebody who wants to look a little bit of information, somebody who wants a full training session, somebody who wants to come out in person. We want to provide that. And we try and promote and engage people through Twitter, Facebook Live, and a whole slew of other ways, just so the reason somebody doesn't get help is because they didn't hear about us. That's what we want to make sure we're making an impact on.
And we do have you linked up to our webpage, pahomepage.com, so anyone who's looking for information, you can find it there. I want to ask about the Promise Garden. I find that interesting. Tell us a little bit about that.
The Promise Garden is a really moving part of the Walk to End Alzheimer's. We put out flowers that sort of like pinwheels, and if you get a good wind, they're all spinning out there together. Different colors represent different ways that Alzheimer's has impacted the life of the person in attendance. So, orange is a general supporter, yellow for a caregiver, purple for somebody who's lost a loved one, and blue for someone who's currently battling. And then at every Walk to End Alzheimer's, we have one white flower, usually held by a child, that represents, hopefully, eventually our first survivor of Alzheimer's disease. And we hope to, that all the money we raise and all the good work we do will eventually lead to that first survivor.
And I have to ask this question because a lot of people are out there. How do we preserve our memory? Is there any tips that we should do to help preserve our memory?
Yeah, so it's almost a trick question, but when you think what's the most important organ in the body, is it the heart or the brain? Pretty equal. So most of the things we know are good for heart health, managing blood pressure, eating well, getting exercise, all have benefits to our brain, as well as being socially active and being mentally active. And that means trying new things. Maybe we've heard, do crossword puzzles. They get easier. So do things that challenge you. And doing that, those are the most protective things we know now. And in fact, in some cases, they're more protective than some of the medications that are out there now. So we want to balance and look at some of that work. And it really is an exciting area of research because we continue to find more and more of these things to be helpful.
And we touched about on this very briefly in the beginning. What are some of the signs? You're saying, as you all get more mature, get up in age, you wonder, is it, I'm getting older, a little bit more forgetful, but what are some of the warning signs, do I use the word warning signs or symptoms, that people should pay attention to at any age?
I think so. We talk warning signs because it really is that. It's not indicative of something being wrong, but it's a warning sign that it might be. And so trouble with time and place, personality changes in inability to do daily tasks that you're used to, language difficulties. There's a whole slew of things. In fact, we have 10 warning signs. What we say is if you see a couple of them, it's typically not normal aging. It could be something else. It doesn't necessarily mean it's dementia or Alzheimer's disease, but it means something's going on, and especially if we start seeing more changes. So we want to look at some of those things and consider that it's not just memory, but it's really the things we do day in and day out.
Very quickly, it's the kind of thing where if you see it and you ask that question, is this a sign? It probably is.
It's not a bad way to look at it, and if the people around us are concerned or noticing things, one of the biggest things we can do is check ourselves and say, hey, they're seeing a change over a little bit longer term. But yeah, if we're asking enough, it's a sign that we should at least talk to our physician about it.
Well, Clay and Ryan, we want to thank you for joining us today, and we remind everyone there's the 1-800 number, and we have the information on today's show on pahomepage.com under the NewsMakers link. And if you're interested in learning about fundraising, you can also check them out there for setting up a team for the Walk to End Alzheimer's. Clay and Ryan, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for your great work.
For Andy Mehalshick and everyone behind the scenes, we thank you so much for making NewsMakers part of your day, and we'll talk again next time.